On this episode of Let's Explore This, we are going to be discussing a town that is now, well, buried beneath the waters of that lake right there. Actually, you know what? We're on the wrong side of that lake. 'Cause we should be starting right here. This here is Bryson Walk. Now, why is this road important? Well, let's drive down it a ways and see. See that sign right there? Yes, it says Old NC 288. At one time, this road that runs along what must have once been a beautiful stretch of the Tuckasegee River was a main thoroughfare through the area. That is, until a river was dammed and this lake was created. Now, what remains of a large stretch of NC 288 lies on the floor of that lake, along with the town we will be discussing on this episode. So, here is an excerpt of an age-old map from 1929, showing a bit of the route of NC 288 prior to the construction of the dam. Clearly, there was a time when one could travel this road along the Tuckasegee and Little Tennessee rivers. You would come across towns like Noland and the town we will be discussing on this episode, Bushnell. It may not have been the largest on the North Shore, but it was very important. Today, along the short stretch of what was once NC 288, you will find a park that bears the name of 288, David P. Monteith. Now, folks, that name Monteith is going to become prominent throughout the episode a little bit later. The only way Bushnell can be discussed is through photos. I mean, I can't do anything about it. There is nothing left of the town. In the bulk of this episode, it will be in regards to this very town you are looking at right now, though one or two nearby communities will also be discussed. Though I cannot take you to most of these places, this episode is going to be made rich due to the decent number of photos involved. The vast majority of the photos used on this episode are culled from an archived collection stored at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And now, let's get started. Bushnell. It was located on the Tuckasegee at its confluence with the Little Tennessee River. For starters, I think the time has come to show you an ancient map. In fact, a very old ancient map. This here is a portion of the 1760 Thomas Kitchen map, a new map of the Cherokee Nation. This may be the first published map to show any level of detail for the Tuckasegee River Valley. The long-lost Cherokee village of Ivanga, which is positioned where Bushnell would become, is situated at the confluence of the Tuckasegee and Little Tennessee rivers. Ivanga is believed to be the only marginally documented 18th century Cherokee town in the immediate Bushnell vicinity. The 1730 Hunter map, which you are looking at right now, also shows an unlabeled settlement at approximately the same location. There is no other documented evidence available concerning Ivanga, however. It is likely that the name, if not the location, was a misinterpretation by the cartographer. If there was in fact a town at that site, it was apparently not visited by Grant's English military in 1761. You know, James Grant, the man who led the expedition against the Cherokee during the Anglo-Cherokee War. The reasons for such a speculative conclusion arose from research done into the history of ancient Cherokee towns. Interestingly, one rock art site is known to be present, though officially unrecorded. That site is said to be beneath the full pool of Fontana Lake in the Bushnell area, and probably dates to the historic period, though not sure of what century that term is referring to in this instance. Furthermore, it is said that there are prehistoric petroglyph trail markers near the high-water mark of Welch Branch. Early explorers and settlers did use the trails in this area. If you were to ask me if such petroglyph trail markers still exist, I could only say one thing. I have no idea. If they are not buried beneath the waters of the lake, then you would need to likely take a boat and hike this here Welch Branch vicinity. Regardless, though, history tells of the white man being in this area as early as 1829, when the river road was built from Dalton Gap southeast to Georgia. General Winfield Scott forced the Cherokee Indians to march down the Little Tennessee in 1838 during the Trail of Tears. And it was at Bushnell that Sully was executed for killing the soldier who prodded his wife with the bayonet for not walking fast. Here is a picture of an Indian family near Bushnell, though not sure of the year. In fact, what would come to be Bushnell had only a few families until the Western Carolina Railroad started laying track and digging the Indian Ridge Tunnel on the Little Tennessee River. One of those early few families went by the name of Welch, possibly even the most important. Joseph Welch was one of the most noted early settlers in the area. And he settled somewhere between Welch Branch and Chambers Creek, circa 1828. Welch, he was instrumental in developing the western portion of what was once called the Little Tennessee Turnpike. And the Little Tennessee Turnpike, which is likely not the road in this pic of a road near Bushnell, was built in the 1830s and extended down the north bank of the Little Tennessee from its confluence with the Tuckasegee into Tennessee. Although Welch was forced to declare bankruptcy due to the financial failure of the turnpike, he was able to keep his land. Who knows, though? Maybe part of that turnpike turned into this road. The upkeep of the turnpike was apparently taken over by Macon County. Then, apparently, it ceased to be a toll road. Interestingly, a small stockade at the Welch homestead, likely not this one, may have been used to temporarily hold Cherokee prisoners during the 1838 removal, and Colonel Foster and his 4th Infantry, hunting Sully and other escaped Cherokees, were headquartered at Welch's for a time in November of 1838. 3 of the Cherokees involved in the Sully episode were brought to Welch's after their capture, and Welch, he was one of the 3 witnesses against them prior to their execution on November 23rd. A few days earlier, Welch had also been a signatory on the petition to Colonel Foster, requesting permission for Uchella and his band to remain in the area. Yes, this is a Welch home, but again, likely not the Joseph Welch one. Joseph Welch and his wife Catherine had at least 8 children, the youngest of which inherited the family homestead. Although Nantahala Power and Light acquired much land in the area for a proposed reservoir in the 1920s and 30s, the Welch family continued to live in the Bushnell area until the development of Fontana Lake in the 1940s. It turns out that this man, Colonel Alexander Boyd Andrews, president of the Richmond and Danville Railroad, which passed through this area, named the village for his friend Asa Smith Bushnell of Ohio. And Bushnell? It went on to become one of the more important railroad towns in the North Shore vicinity. By the time the first passenger train arrived in 1886, there also arrived a new name, the Richmond and Danville Railroad. This line, on July 1st of 1894, became the Southern Railway, and Southern operated through Bushnell until the Tennessee Valley Authority rerouted the track in March of 1944, clearing the way for the Fontana Reservoir. Of course, an important town, railroad or not, also needs one of these. The Bushnell Post Office was established on May 7th of 1886. William L. Young was appointed postmaster. Of course, back in those days, cars have yet to make their presence known. So, a man walked or rode a mule to deliver mail to other communities down the Little Tennessee. Communities like Fairfax and Bone Valley. There were, of course, a host of other postmasters that have been appointed in Bushnell. In 1928, there was Fred Lee Monteith, and in 1934, there was an Edgar Ralph Fisher. There was a noted reason for these changes, and the reason? Well, it was simple. Monteith was a Republican, and Fisher was a Democrat. Edgar Fisher was once reported as saying the following: "In the early 1940s, all the mail for 5,000 Fontana Dam construction workers came to my store, high as I could stack it." Then, the Carolina and Tennessee Southern carried it 17 miles to the dam site. Okay, so it did say his store, which I am going to take as meaning the post office. I would think mail goes to a post office and not a store. Fisher, he was the last postmaster of the 24 towns along the Tuckasegee and Little Tennessee rivers. Fontana Lake would flood the area in 1944. When the Bushnell post office closed on November 30th of 1943, Fisher headed for higher ground at Bryson City. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history of the railroad through the Bushnell area. Construction began in 1903 on the Carolina and Tennessee Southern Railway. It ran west from Bushnell, just under 14 miles down the Little Tennessee River to Fontana and the Montvale Lumber Company. This opened up the vast logging of the Great Smokies with 15 lumber mills. And the first passenger train? It left Bushnell for Fontana on May 29th of 1908. And by 1908, there were 3 passenger train lines operating along the Little Tennessee in Swain County. The Southern Railway, the Carolina and Tennessee Southern Railway, and the Smoky Mountain Railway. Now, of course, we are not really talking about the railroad at where I am now walking. That stretch of railroad being discussed is now buried beneath the lake. In fact, the Southern Railway reached Bryson City in 1844, and from there it extended west along the north bank of the Tuckasegee as far as Bushnell. There it turned south, crossed the Tuckasegee, and followed first the Little Tennessee and then the Nantahala to the south, towards Murphy. The railroad was not extended west from Bushnell until the early 1900s, when the Carolina and Tennessee Southern Railroad was built to the Montvale Lumber Company town of Fontana at the mouth of Eagle Creek. That point marked the farthest extension of the main line to the west, although the Kitchen Lumber Company built a 3 to 4 mile extension to Kitchenville near Fairfax in the 1920s. Anyhow, by 1900, Bushnell, it had grown so fast that a delegation appeared before the North Carolina Corporation Commission at Raleigh. It was stated that petitioners alleged insufficient depot and side-track accommodations at Bushnell. The defendant agreed to give the relief asked. Also, in the Bushnell area was the Welch Prospect. This was a small copper, gold, and silver prospect located north of Highway 288, about 1¼ miles below Bushnell. The prospect consisted of a 45-foot-long tunnel that was driven approximately at the level of the river road. This is almost certainly the same mine referred to in a July 30th, 1964, Smoky Mountain Times article that describes a mine at the bottom of a flat-topped mountain which contained a huge hole from which hot air rushed. That was clearly a reference to Guardhouse Mountain on the Welch property. Rock samples taken by Emmons in the 1940s returned small quantities of copper, silver, and a trace amount of gold. While rural America still did not have power, 3 families in Bushnell apparently did: Edgar Fisher and Sherman Welch had Delco electric plants operated by gasoline engines. Ed Welch had a water wheel turning his Delco plant on Welch Branch at Frogtown, west of Bushnell. And this? Well, it was reportedly his house, as it is listed as that of Ed Welch. And all 3 men, they were merchants. Ellis Monteith had the only telephone at Bushnell. 2 wires were strung across the Tuckasegee River and for miles to Judson, where it was connected to an 8-party line. And the Judson line traveled 15 miles to the Bryson City operator, Nellie Jenkins. Since Monteith heard all 8 party line signals, his ring was 2 longs and 2 shorts. Ah, party lines. Remember them? Good, 'cause I sure don't. Rufus Monteith. He operated a ferry for many years on the Tuckasegee River above Bushnell. It ceased operation in 1930. Again, folks, we are not talking about this area, but about the ferry once having been located a number of miles in that direction. Well, in that direction could be correct. It did say a couple of miles on the Tuckasegee above Bushnell, which could very well put it over here. However, I don't think that is it. I don't think that ferry is operating today in 2021. I mean, it said it ceased operation many, many, many decades ago. But who knows? This here is where the Tuckasegee does enter Fontana Lake. There were 2 swinging bridges across the Tuckasegee at various times. Now, this could be it, though this could also be one across the Little Tennessee. As a result, Bushnell did prosper and would incorporate in 1901. There were 3 stores, a railroad station, a church, a school, a doctor, a dentist, a drugstore, a barber shop, a post office, and 2 hotels. And Dr. Joseph Elbert Taylor Welch? He was at one time the local doctor. What do you say now we talk about school? Yeah, I know, you kids hate that, but it has to be. The first Bushnell school, it was established in 1894. Yes, I have no picture of that very old school building. I have no idea if such a picture exists. If you paid close attention just a tad bit earlier, though, you would have seen this school. The Swain County Board of Education, on July 5th of 1915, ordered 4 people to be a committee for the building of a new school on Pound Mill Branch in Frogtown. The building, it was opened on January 3rd of 1916, and W.C. Welch, he was paid $100 for the site. Then, in 1925, the school found itself being enlarged, and an acre was purchased from E.C. Monteith and wife Ida C. Monteith. And this here is the 1928 graduates. In an interesting turn of events, the Odd Fellows Lodge number 328 was, on March 6th of 1911, given permission to build a hall over the Bushnell School. And later, in 1941, Bushnell became a 3-teacher school. When Bluff Branch, Chambers Creek, Forney, and Noland schools were all consolidated, all from areas scattered throughout the region on this here beautiful Google Earth map. Eventually, though, the Tennessee Valley Authority purchased this here Bushnell School for the Fontana Reservoir, and on May 23rd of 1943, it was closed. Well, with the school now drowned and wiped off the visible face of the map, we are going to turn our attention to the Bushnell Missionary Baptist Church. Bushnell Missionary Baptist Church was relatively a young church. The earliest mention of it is this work, The History of the Tennessee River Baptist Association from 1830 to 1892. The Reverend John Freeman was the last pastor when the congregation disbanded in 1943. At the last service, 43 congregants had reportedly been present. Interestingly, Bushnell's church did not have a cemetery. However, the church does live on today. But in the Lowada Cemetery, established by the Tennessee Valley Authority, near Bryson City, 33 persons from the old Monteith Cemetery at Bushnell were reinterred here in 1943 by the Tennessee Valley Authority. Former residents of Bushnell also have been buried in this Bushnell Church Cemetery. Okay, folks, I'm going to assume that this is the one they are referring to. And the main reason I'm going to assume that is there are a number of headstones here with the name of Monteith. And it kind of is separated, as you can see, by some posts, as opposed to the Kirkland portion that's over here, which, for those of you that do not know, does have its own marker stipulating that it is Kirkland's cemetery. But as far as Bushnell goes, there does not appear to be such a marker over here. So I'm only going to assume that this might be the one they are referring to. If you want, folks, they did say 33. Maybe you can go ahead and count them all. If there are in fact 33, then this is probably it. However, a few more could have been added since then, making the number a little bit larger, who knows. But I am just going to assume that this is probably the one they're referring to. Monteith Cemetery. It was once the largest burial ground on the Tuckasegee and Little Tennessee rivers. The cemetery had 256 graves and was located on the Monteith branch of the Tuckasegee River, about 1.5 miles upstream and east of Bushnell. Beginning in July of 1943, the Tennessee Valley Authority moved most of the graves to the relocated Monteith Cemetery here in Lowata. The town's population, it reportedly grew to over 1,000 in the early 1900s, when it became a break-in-bulk point where goods were transferred from the railroad's main line, which continued south along the Little Tennessee, first to local roads, and later to the Fontana Spur. Since Bushnell was never enumerated separately in the census, the population may include surrounding areas as well. In 1912, Bushnell was described in railroad promotional literature as follows. For several notable reasons, this little town gives promise of remarkable development. It is the starting point of a new branch of the Southern Railway, which is designed to connect this section of western North Carolina directly with Knoxville, Tennessee. The county surrounding the town is devoted largely to fruit growing, and it is in the very heart of the finest apple-growing region in western North Carolina. The scenery in this vicinity is rugged, picturesque, and beautiful. So, folks, what do you say we talk a little bit more about what Bushnell had to offer in those early days? Rollins M. Thomason built this hotel complex in 1897. R.G. Coffey, Sherman Welch, Fred L. Monteith, Ellis Chastain Monteith, and Ed Welch at various times operated the grocery store in the old hotel. And talking about stores, there was yet another important one besides that which was in this hotel complex. Across the road stood this very store. Yeah, it was apparently gabled in the back and fronted with a tall rectangular facade. A straight-on view would make you think the building is rectangular, but as you can see, it most definitely was not. Anyhow, Daniel Grant Fisher built Fisher's General Store in 1906, and his son, Edgar R. Fisher, operated it from 1927 until 1943. Oh, and a Harlan Enlow had yet another grocery store east of this. Ellis Monteith sold caskets at his store and was reportedly also the local undertaker. You know, he prepared the body of Fontana mine official Frank McGuire, who was killed on July 14th, 1924, in an explosion. And his coffin? Well, it was placed on the Southern Railway passenger train for 33 miles to Cullowhee for burial. That means his body must have passed through this section of Bryson City. I wonder if he stopped at Mountain Parks for a nice cup of coffee. And at around the same time, in 1926 to be exact, a major road improvement began to take shape. The Forney Creek Road District of Swain County floated 2 bond issues totaling $700,000 to finance the construction of North Carolina Highway 288 that would replace the old Joseph Welch River Turnpike and the Carolina and Southern Railroad that would be flooded by Alcoa's then proposed reservoir. And Highway 288? Well, it connected Bryson City and U.S. Highway 129 at Deal's Gap. Even though it provided access to Tennessee and beyond, the winding mountainside unpaved road was mainly used by local traffic. Okay, so I cannot be certain if this photo here was of the road that once existed in the Bushnell area. However, I cannot be certain if it is actually even Highway 288. I suspect it probably is, but I still cannot be certain. Regardless, the Tennessee Valley Authority described Highway 288 in the early 1940s as an extremely narrow, winding mountain road that is totally unsuitable for heavy hauling and personnel traffic. It was also described as a narrow, unpaved road with very low standards of alignment and grade. Highway 288 is shown on a 1930 North Carolina County Roads Survey as a hard-surfaced road that runs the length of the county. Despite that, it has been reported that Highway 288 was never paved. Now, yes, here I am, once again, driving on what remains of 288. And yes, it certainly does appear paved. So, if it was unpaved, when did this part become paved? Was this the first part to ever be paved? I don't know. I don't know everything. Although Highway 288 had been designed to be above the pool of Alcoa's proposed reservoir, which would have been impounded by a 200-foot dam. At the future Fontana Dam site, most of the road was to be inundated by the proposed 480-foot-high dam. The Tennessee Valley Authority concluded that the estimated $1,200,000 required to relocate the road using comparable construction standards was more than the value of the land served. The Tennessee Valley Authority also added that the War Production Board had indicated the construction of the road was not of sufficient importance to justify the expenditure of materials and manpower required for work during the war. Consequently, the Tennessee Valley Authority proposed an alternate solution that would cost only $1,075,000 and would result in advantages to the mutual benefit of all concerned. It has been reported that at the 16th mile on Highway 288 lied Bushnell. It was at the confluence of the Little Tennessee and Tuckasegee rivers, and in this region, the cabins cling to the mountain sides or perch across the river. connected with the road by swinging bridges. And most of the people here, they were reportedly Nordic. There were few Negroes and almost no tenant farmers. In the end, Bushnell lost its importance with the demise of the local lumber industry. By 1939, its population had shrunk to about 75. By that time, much of the land in the vicinity and extending downriver had been acquired by Nantahala Power and Light for a proposed reservoir. A plan that was soon to be supplanted by the Tennessee Valley Authority's proposed Fontana project. Planometric and land acquisition maps from the 1930s and 40s, such as this one from 1936, depict a small settlement of less than 20 homes and other structures dispersed along about a mile of Highway 288 and up Welch Branch. A school is drawn near the mouth of the stream, and a church, the Bushnell Baptist Church, is a short distance up the drainage to the north. A suspension bridge and a railroad bridge extended south across the Tuckasegee just above the confluence, providing access to Judson and other settlements to the south, along the east bank of the Little Tennessee River. A community report developed for the Fontana Project gave this summary in the early 1940s of what would happen to Bushnell. This, the larger community, is one of the few communities affected by the construction program of the Tennessee Valley Authority, which will be completely obliterated by the formation of the lake. The roads will be inundated. The school and church buildings will be torn down, and all the families will move to new locations outside the community. The influx of workers for the dam project posed an immediate housing problem, which was only partially remedied by the construction of Fontana Village in Welch Cove, a short distance southwest of the dam site. Many workers poured into the area prior to the completion of the village, however. They went on to rent or otherwise occupy almost any empty building available in Bushnell. They occupied a deserted gas station and an unused warehouse. Soon, the Tennessee Valley Authority's Population Readjustment Division began to receive complaints from the North Carolina State Health Officer about the lack of sanitary facilities and the grave danger of epidemics posed by the makeshift settlements. In response, the agency sponsored a shack development control program to funnel the transients into the village and to prevent families from settling permanently in the shacks. The Fontana project overall resulted in the inundation of approximately 10,760 acres of land, including parts of the Little Tennessee, Nantahala, and Tuckasegee rivers and their tributaries. The project also resulted in the relocation of about 1,320 families, 600 of which had been residents of the area before construction began. In total, 1,486 tracts, covering 68,291 acres, were purchased. Most of these were in private ownership, but 422, or almost 30%, had been previously obtained by Nantahala Power and Light in connection with previous reservoir proposals. All of Bushnell was inundated by Fontana Lake. In late 1944, Highway 288 was lost. The Southern Railway was rerouted, and the Carolina and Tennessee Southern Railway was salvaged. And in 1943, the Bushnell area became a part of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.